You know, one thing you hear a lot is cooking is an art and baking is more of a science, and I think pizza kind of falls in the middle of that. You have to be really specific when you're making the dough, but when you get into the actual pizza making part of it and the dough is made, then you can kind of really get creative in any way that you want. It's one thing that I love about pizza is that one part of it you have to be super scientific, and then the other part of it you kind of let your mind go. Hey, I'm Frank Pinello. I'm the owner-operator of Best Pizza in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and the host of the pizza show here on Munchies. And today we're gonna go through some of your favorite New York pizza recipes, but for the home cook. So for the real pizza enthusiasts out there, we're gonna go through making the dough. And we're gonna work on two different types of very popular New York style pizza. One of them is gonna be your classic Napoli style pizza, and the second one is gonna be the square grandma pizza. I usually tell people go to your local pizzeria and buy some dough, but people that are willing to give it a shot and make the dough at home, it's a really fun project to do. And when you really start perfecting it, you could really see the difference in the pizzas. We're gonna go over the ingredients, your basic AP flour, a little bit of salt, we have some dry yeast, some great olive oil, and we're gonna start with the water. The water in the dough making process is really important. You know, the atmosphere affects dough. You might hear people talk about if it's cold outside, you have to use warm water, vice versa. It's really important. Today, it's a beautiful day in New York, so I'm just gonna use a lukewarm water so we'll get the yeast activated a little bit. And we're gonna be using a cup and a half of water. Next, we'll go to olive oil. So we're gonna do 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Not much, and we just wanna add a little bit of fat to the dough. From there, we're gonna go to our yeast. At Best Pizza, we use a fresh baker's yeast. It's much easier to find a dry yeast at the supermarket, and we're gonna put about 10 grams of yeast in. And if it's a gram or two over a shot, no big deal. And then last but not least is the salt. I mean, we don't wanna under-season our dough. So we're gonna take some kosher salt, 1 tablespoon and a half. For the flour, it's 3.5 cups. So I like to kind of make a little hole in the middle and then start to add. Now, if you find that while you're working it through, the dough feels a little bit too wet or too dry, you could always make small adjustments. Next to the olive oil. And before we put in the yeast, we're gonna come over to the sink and just bloom it. And what I mean by bloom is add a little bit of warm water to the yeast, let it sit for a couple seconds, mix it around with your finger, and essentially I want this yeast to turn into a paste. One of the things you hear a lot about pizza is that pizza is a living thing. You know, it sounds wacky, but it's not. This yeast is living, you know. When you make pizza and you are dealing with dough, it's like dealing with a pet, essentially. You always have to tend to it. The activity is constantly going on inside of the bread. And I tell people this time and time again, making pizza is not easy, it's hard. But if you make enough pizzas, you get good at it. No shortcuts, you gotta make a lot. All right, so now we're gonna incorporate the yeast, get that in there. It's kind of important to get it all in. And if you're having a little bit of difficulty getting it at the bottom of the cup, that's it. Back to the sink, a little bit of water, swish it around a little bit with your finger, and right back in. So now we have all of our main ingredients incorporated into this bowl. And believe it or not, the yeast is already starting to get working. Making dough by hand is by far one of my favorite things. You know, dumping all these ingredients into the bowl and then just sort of watching the dough come together. And then in a few minutes, it's gonna rise and be ready to cook. It's just, there's something really basic about it, but it's a stress reliever for some reason. So when you're mixing the dough, it's very normal that you're gonna get some dough stuck on your fingers and it's gonna kind of be hard to get off. It might be a little tacky. One of the best techniques is wash your hands with flour. And you get all those little pieces of dough that were just on your hands right back in. That was a little lesson I was taught by one of my first mentors, and I still use it to this day. Now that we have the pizza dough in a nice ball, flour spread out on the table, kind of get that ball and put it right out. Look at that already, it's beautiful. And now we're getting into the actual kneading process of making the dough. Gluten is like a rubber band. If you stop playing with it too much, it becomes elasticy and stretchy, and then in turn becomes hard to eat. Right from the beginning, we teach our guys to kind of be delicate with the dough. So you could feel as you start folding this dough over, and you could see it's not as dry as it looked. And it's starting to really get a little bit tacky. I really like the consistency, but I am gonna add a little more flour. And really the point when you stop putting flour on is when the dough is not sticking to your hands anymore. And we're about there right now. Yeah, sure, it looks good now, but it's not quite ready. We're gonna put the dough back into the bowl, put some saran wrap over the top, and kind of let it relax. And when it chills, that's kind of when the magic happens. At Best Pizza, we usually like to proof our dough for 24 hours. And what that does is it just gives it time to kind of build character. Here, it's not really necessary for it to sit that long. If you have a nice warm kitchen, you can put the dough out and let it sit for an hour. But if you want to do the same process that we do, it's very simple. All you have to do is take this dough ball, wrap it up in saran wrap, and put it into your refrigerator in the back corner. And once you see it start to grow after 24 to 48 hours, your dough is ready. When you give a dough like this enough time to sort of proof it, the yeast is starting to break down the protein strains of gluten. When you eat that pizza, it's easier to chew, and essentially it's easier to digest. So I joke around a lot with our customers, and they're like, I can't eat any more best pizza. I ate 3 pies this week. I'm like, listen man, we burn clean. With your bench scraper or a spatula, just kind of take it from the bottom, flip it, and then you put that top on the bottom on the top, so it stays nice and moist. A little bit of flour in the bowl, and we're gonna saran wrap it and leave it for 20 minutes. And there you have it. Your dough is made. That's the hardest part of this, folks. All we have to do is get to this point, and now we're home free. This is the fun part. So a couple important things when you're making pizza is that you just need really 2 or 3 pieces of equipment that'll make your life a lot easier. One of them is a pizza peel. We've all seen one of these, classic pizza peel. And the second is the stone. This is the pizza stone. It's very hot right now because we have it heating up. I'm just kind of taking it out just to show you guys. It doesn't really make sense to take these things out at all. Pizza stone on the bottom rack makes the most sense to me. We really want to get that stone as hot as we can. So as soon as the pizza sits on it, it develops that crust that we all look for in a New York style pizza. Our dough has been resting for 20 minutes. This dough really came out good. It's proofed beautifully. You can kind of see some wrinkles in there. And the first thing that we're gonna do is that we're gonna portion it correctly. A 10 to 12-inch pizza is what makes sense for like a standard oven in the kitchen. For the round pizzas, we're gonna start with a pizza that's good for 1 to 2 people. The pizza dough that we just had was roughly 700 grams. Once we cut it down and we create these smaller portions, you'll have a much easier job of stretching the pizza. First thing that we're gonna do is go back to our flour. Now we got pizza number 1 looking like it's ready to go. It's kind of formed, it feels really good. So first thing that we're gonna do is determine what side was the top and what side was the bottom. I could tell just from the smooth texture on top that this was the top of the pizza. And the reason for that is we wanna keep moisture in when it cooks. We'll take a little bit of flour and we'll start to flour our peel. And now we get into the fun part. With your fingertips to make a crust, all you're doing is not touching the edge. Just kind of spread it out. And it may not look much like a crust now, but once it starts to cook, because you didn't push down that edge part, that rim will puff right up. When we put on the ingredients, you'll see we put lighter ingredients in the middle and heavier around the outside. Because when that crust puffs up, it sort of pushes everything into the middle. Throughout this whole process, it's important to sort of be delicate and like aware of how you hold the dough. If you start off nice and easy, kind of flipping it from hand to hand, that's really one way to start. And then once you start getting better, you can kind of put your knuckles and your hands underneath and start to spread it this way. As you start to develop the feel for the dough, you'll really get it down, right on the peel. And I know that there's some of you out there that are like me. You tend to want to be a perfectionist. If it's making you that crazy, you can just take the pizza cutter and just cut out a perfect circle. Now we're at the point ready to put on some tomato sauce. When it comes to tomatoes and tomato sauce, all you need here is a San Marzano tomato, or a tomato that you know comes from either California, somewhere locally. What we look for in a tomato at Best Pizza is acidity and minerality. And the process is literally just opening up a 10 can of tomatoes, ricing them or food milling them, and then adding salt. The cooking for this sauce happens in the oven. This is about 4-ounce ladle, I would say. We're just gonna take 3 ounces. We won't fill it up all the way, and then we'll judge. And when you start off with that tomato right in the middle, and then with the bottom of your ladle, you want to get the sauce away from the center. From there, we go to really the one classic ingredient, in my opinion, that defines New York pizza, and that's dried oregano. We're going to sprinkle on the oregano. From here, mozzarella cheese. This is a fresh mozzarella cheese that we make at Best Pizza. It's very easy to go to any one of your local stores in the neighborhood. Fresh mozzarella. Kind of break it up with your hand. What I like to do is try to balance my ratios. This is gonna give out a lot of fat and a little bit of moisture, so I try not to go too heavy with the cheese. So I'm getting ready to launch this pizza into the oven right now, and just an important thing is that you don't want any like wet spots on the peel. If there's a spot of sauce over there, no big deal. A little bit of flour and you wipe it off. So right now the pizza stone is inside our oven, and the oven is at 500 degrees. We put the stone in with the oven, so it kind of brought up with the heat. You kind of gently slide it in. Just put it on a little bit of an angle, but yeah, came out really nice and evenly. Nice. That stone is nice. Yeah, look at this pizza, came nice. I wouldn't be mad if I was a home cook with this. So this pizza took about 10 minutes to cook. It's about your classic 10-inch pizza, good for like 1 or 2 people. Really, like the nice thing about it is that these modern day stones really get hot on the bottom. So you start to get that caramelization around the edges. The cheese kind of broke apart nicely. The ratio of it looks great. We have some beautiful basil that we picked right out in the garden here at Munchies. And what I'm gonna do is just kind of tear it up and put it on top. Just your classic Napolitan style margherita pizza. It's simple, but it's delicious. The last thing to do is really cut it. But you could use a regular knife or a pizza cutter always works. What you really want to hear is that crunch when you cut the pizza. And just leave them like that, however you prefer. There you go, New York style pizza at home. This is a hard pizza to make. It's not easy, so if you don't knock it out the first time, don't get discouraged, keep going. Next though, we're gonna make the grandma pizza. You know, the first time I ever had the grandma pizza was out in Long Island at a restaurant called Umberto's, and it's a very simple pizza to make. We're gonna start with a nice generous amount of olive oil on the bottom of the pan. And as you can see, I'm not holding back. With your clean hands, you kind of want to spread it around. And this is a technique that might seem a little interesting or weird, but what we're gonna do is take just a very little bit of olive oil and sort of stretch our dough right on this table. And what that does is, rather than the flour where it lets it glide, this allows it to stick. And here we go. And you can see that this is really nice and proofed up. It has a lot of air. I'm trying to be as delicate as possible, not popping any of the bubbles. Essentially, we have the dough at the same size as the tray. Lift up one corner and try to walk your way over into the dough until you're able to lift it all, and then gently kind of place it right over the top. I don't like my pizza too thick and too doughy, so in a situation like this where I have so much hanging off the side, I'm just gonna take my pizza cutter and just cut it right off. Really quickly throw some plastic wrap over the top, and we're gonna let this pizza proof for about 10 minutes at most. It's important to give this one a nice airtight wrap, so we'll put this to the side in a warm area for 10 minutes. So one of the signature parts of the grandma pizza is by far the grandma sauce. I love a savory and acidic sort of balance, and this sauce never gets cooked. It's essentially just taking tomatoes, pouring it into a bowl, crushing it up with your hands, seasoning with salt and pepper to the way that you like it, and then throwing in whatever else you want in there. The pizza has been sitting over into the side, proofing for about 10 minutes. You could see that it's risen. You could see the bubbles really coming up. What I like to do is not touch this. This pizza has spread the way it wanted to. One of the telltale signs of the grandma pizza is the cheese on first. Here, the grandma gets a nice layer of mozzarella cheese. So now we have our blank canvas for the sauce. And what I like to do is always give it a mix to make sure that there's no salt or seasonings caught on the bottom. And then just a ladle, and we're gonna go right down in stripes. When this pizza cooks, it's really important for me that you're able to see the crust, and you're able to see the cheese, and you're able to see the sauce. So ratio is very important. All right, the oven right now is at 500 degrees. This pizza can cook anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. All right, let's check it out. We're gonna take just your basic bench scraper and sort of just rub it along the sides. The good old spatula, and try to get right underneath. We have our grandma pizza. It's obviously a rectangle. It's great for parties. At Best Pizza, we'll cut it straight down the middle. If we're gonna have regular slices, we'll cut it into thirds. When you're the cook, you get to pick the best piece, so I'm going in from this end. Pretty damn good if I say so myself.